The standing order at the Coldmouth Gate was older than the king who kept it. In deep winter, no stranger comes through, not for gold, not for pity, not for a dying man's word. A man who freezes at that gate freezes on the wrong side of it, and the gate stays shut. Maren had one warm thing to her name, her father's cloak, oiled wool, twice restitched at the shoulder, the last thing of his left in the world. On the 6th night of the storm, she carried it out through the little side door and put it around a beggar who could not remember his own name. She went back to her cot, expecting to lose her place at the fortress for it. Instead, in the black hour before dawn, one of the stone guardians on the arch above that gate opened its eyes for the first time in 19 winters, came down off the arch, and stood over the sleeping man until sunrise. 40 men of the night watch saw it happen. Not one of them slept afterward. By morning, the Alpha King had summoned her. He was a man who had not let a living soul touch his bare hand in 9 years, and he had a reason he had told no one. He gave her one sentence in front of the whole hall, in a voice with no heat in it. At the turn of the year, she would lay her hand on the Gatestone, and he would lay his beside it, and the stone would judge what was between them. 1 grain of debt in her, 1 grain of pity, 1 grain of gratitude, and it would refuse them both. And the verse cut into that gate, the one every child in the Reach could recite before they could write their own name, said the woman who gave away her last warmth would take the king's heart in payment. Every soul in that fortress could read it. Not one of them, in 20 years, had noticed that 3 of its strokes were cut with a new chisel. Chapter 1. The storm had been sitting on Coldmouth Pass for 6 days, and on the 6th day, Maren was 40 feet up the gate arch, packing lime into a joint the frost had pried open. She was 26 years old, and she had been mending this gate since she was 9. Below her the yard was a white blur. She could just make out Vihil, the guardian on the western corner, hunched with its wings folded down its back. On the eastern corner sat Patience, worn faceless by 200 winters. And in the yard beneath them lay Sorrow, in pieces, under a tarpaulin nobody had lifted in 9 years. "You do not get paid for that arch," Bettany Fell shouted up from the ladder. Bettany was the gate cook, gray-blonde, blue-eyed, with hands as red as boiled beets. "It is cracked," Maren shouted back down, pushing her chestnut braid out of her face with the back of a wrist. Corin had died 9 years ago in the North Stair, when a rebuilt wall came down in the night and took him and 2 other men with it. Maren had been 17. She had his gray-green eyes and his hands, and most of his temper, and they gave her his tools and his cloak, but not his wage, because she was an apprentice and a woman, and the Lowland Guild had opinions about both. Dusk came early. The horn went at the gate, one long note, which meant somebody was on the road. Captain Orrin Shale was at the slot in the small door, sandy-haired, going gray, brown-eyed, blunt as a maul, and Maren had never known him to enjoy his own authority. "Man on the road," Orrin said. "Old. Sitting down. He has stopped." "Then open the gate, Captain." "I cannot. Deep winter order. No stranger through this gate until the thaw. It is the king's own law, and it is older than him." "He will die out there." "The order says no stranger comes in," she said slowly. "Captain, does it say anything at all about going out?" Orrin Shale looked at her a long moment. "It does not," he said. The old man sat with his back to the stone, knees up, chin down, with a beard the color of dirty snow. "I have soup," Maren said. "It is barley. It is not good, but it is hot." He raised his head. His right eye was a clear, pale brown. His left was milky white all the way across, and not the milk of an ordinary blindness. It had a grain in it, like the polished face of river granite. "You are on the wrong side of your own wall," he said. His voice was a scrape. So are you, Maren said. Drink. She held the pot because his hands would not close, and that was when she saw the left one properly. From the knuckles to the wrist, the skin had gone smooth and gray and faintly shining, like clay pressed and then fired, and cold in a way that had nothing to do with the night. She said nothing about it. "What is your name?" she said instead. "I had one," he said. "I set it down somewhere." "Then we will find it later," Maren said. He was not shivering, and she knew what that meant. Shivering is the body still arguing. He had stopped arguing. So she took off her father's cloak, the last thing on this earth that had touched him while he was alive, and put it around the old man's shoulders and tied the cord briskly, the way you do a thing you must not feel your way through. "That is a good cloak," the old man said. "It is the best one there has ever been," Maren said. "You will give it back to me in the morning." She went back in with an empty pot and no cloak, and the cold went through her shirt like a blade through paper. He would live, or he would not. That was all anybody got. She was wrong about that, as it turned out. Past the 3rd hour, the fortress woke all at once. Not a bell, a sound she felt in the floor before she heard it, like lake ice giving way under its own weight. The yard was full of men holding lanterns and not moving. Up on the arch, the western corner was empty. Vigil was in the road. The guardian stood outside the gate with snow driving through the joints of its folded wings, bent over the sleeping man the way a person bends over a cradle. Its head had turned, and Maren, who knew the exact hairline crack at the root of that left wing because she had filled it herself, could see plainly that its eyes were open. Then Orange Shale said quietly, "Somebody wake the king." Maren stood in the snow in her shirt sleeves and understood, with a cold that had nothing to do with the weather, that she had just been seen. Chapter 2. They came for her at first light, and they came politely, which somehow made it worse. Stonewatch was 2 fortresses pretending to be one. Below, the lower yard, the gate, and the mason's shed. Above, up the north stair and through the iron door, the upper keep, where the Alpha King wintered. Maren had been up that stair 11 times in her life, always with a mortarboard, and she went up it now with nothing in her hands, which felt obscene. She had seen Kaelen Roth before at a distance, the way you see weather. Up close he was not what the distance had promised. 32 years old, tall, black hair going silver early at both temples, eyes of a pale amber that did not move off a thing once they had settled on it. And he wore gloves indoors, at his own table, and nobody in that room found it strange, which told Maren it had been going on a long time. "Maren Shaw," said the beta at his shoulder. That was Torin Kell, red-brown hair, green eyes, with the face of a man who had made a career of saying difficult things lightly. "Mason of the lower yard, daughter of Corin Shaw." "Come here," the king said. "Tell me what you did," Kaelen said. "I took a man some soup outside the gate, your grace, and I gave him my cloak. I did not open the gate. Captain Shale kept the order." "Why?" "Because he had stopped shivering, and I had a cloak." She heard herself keep going. "I have mended that arch every autumn for 9 years, and it never once said thank you. If I had known what would happen, I would still have gone, but I would have worn my other coat." The king did not smile, but something moved behind his face, very briefly, like a lamp carried past a shuttered window. "Lady Iona," Kaelen said, "the verse." A silver-haired woman in dark blue stepped forward with a book held against her chest like armor. "Lady Iona Vale, keeper of the verse, dark-eyed, precise." "It is cut into the keystone of the cold-mouth arch," Iona said. "The Gatestone. When the long cold comes for the wolf that wears the crown, a woman with nothing will give her last warmth at the gate. She will wake the sleeping stone, and the stone will take the king's heart in payment." "I did not know it meant me," she said. "It has meant nobody for 200 years, Iona said, not unkindly. "It means you now. Every clause has come true but the last one." "And the last one says she kills him," said a heavy lord in a fur collar. "Send her down to Dunmere and let the verse go looking somewhere else." "You cannot ungive a cloak, my lord," Iona said dryly. "The gate right is the only instrument we have. 2 hands on the gatestone, and the stone reads what is between them: debt, bargain, fear, or gratitude, and it stays cold and refuses them. If it warms, the verse means what it means." She hesitated. "And if the verse is read plainly, your grace, that right is the moment it takes you." Every eye went to the man on the dais. Maren watched him do nothing for the space of 4 breaths. "At the turn of the year," Kaelen Roth said, "she stands at the gatestone, and I stand beside her, and we will see what the stone says." The hall came apart in noise. He let it, then raised one gloved hand, and it stopped. "Until then, she stays in this keep," he said. "Not a prisoner, not a guest either. She works, if she wants to work. Nobody in this fortress lays a hand on her or a word on her." "The old man lives," Kaelen said, quieter for her. "He asked for you." "Did he remember his name?" Maren said. "He did," said the king. "That is the part that should frighten you." He walked out. It was 9 weeks to the turn of the year, and Maren Shaw stood in a hall full of people who had just been told she was either the end of their king or nothing at all. Chapter 3. The old man had his name back, and it turned out to be a name half the Reach had heard. "Ives Harrow," he said, propped up in the infirmary with her father's cloak folded on the chest beside him. "Stonebinder of the Reach. Struck off the roll of the Low Guild 20 years ago for saying the mortar was wrong, which is slander if you say it to the man selling the mortar. Now, the Western Guardian. There is a crack at the root of the left wing, about the length of a hand." There was. "I filled it when I was 17, and again 4 years later when it opened, and I put a lead flashing over it so the water would stop getting in." "Who paid you?" "Nobody pays for the arch." "A guardian is not a statue somebody enchanted," he said. "It is a bargain in the shape of a body. You cut the stone, you set a heart in it, and a person keeps it year after year for nothing, until the stone has taken on so much of that keeping that it can stand up and do it for you. The heart is the anchor, the keeping is the fuel, and the moment you do it to be owed, it stops." She would think about that last part more than she wanted to. "Your father wrote to me once," Ives said. "He wanted to know why the new stone out of Dunmere would not take a bond, and I never answered, because I was on the road by then. I am sorry, Mason. Somebody dropped that wall on him, and it was not the weather." "Ives, why do the kings of the Reach winter at a gate?" He tapped his gray left hand on the bed frame, and it made a sound like a pebble on a plate. "The first king of this line was the first stonebinder," he said, "and he did not set a heart in a statue. He set one in himself. Every king of that blood has paid for it since. You have seen my hand. Now think about a man who wears gloves at his own table. They call it the long cold. It starts in the hand and goes up the arm and across the chest, and when it reaches the middle of him, it stops him like a clock. That keystone is the only thing that slows it. He goes down to the gate in the dark, puts his hand on it, and buys a few more months." She went down to look that same night. There was a man standing under the arch with his hand on the keystone. No guard, in shirt sleeves, in a cold that would crack a bucket, with his coat folded over the mounting block, as if he had done this many times before. His left sleeve was pushed up past the elbow. From the fingertips to a hand's width below it, the Alpha King's forearm was gray, smooth, faintly polished, catching the starlight the way a river stone does when it is wet. And the line where it ended and the living skin began was ragged, like a tide mark. He stood with that hand flat on the stone a long time, head down, the way a man stands at a well when the bucket is a long way from the top. When he lifted his palm off, he swayed. Once. Maren came out of the shadow of the forge, because she knew the difference between a man resting and a man about to go down. "Do not fall on the cobbles, Your Grace," she said. "They are old, and I would have to reset them." He pulled the sleeve down over the gray arm, not fast and not ashamed, but very deliberately, like a man putting a letter in a drawer. "You will not speak of it," he said. "I will not. And you are standing on a slab that is hollow underneath. If you let me lift it and repack it, you would stop nearly falling over every time you finish whatever it is you do here." "You are telling me," Kaelen said slowly, "that I have been unsteady because of a loose flagstone. I am telling you the flagstone is not helping." And the Alpha King of the Reach put his head back and laughed. One short bark of it, out loud in an empty yard, and it startled a roosting bird off the gatehouse. He had his face back at once, but she had heard it, and she stood there holding the sound of it like a coal in her palm. "Sit down, Shah," he said, and moved his coat so there was room on the mounting block. "Why the cloak? You had one warm thing. Nobody was watching. You gained nothing. People do not do that. In my experience, they do a smaller version of it and tell the story for years." "I would like to give you a noble answer, and I do not have one," she said. "Here is the true one. My father died under a wall. Nobody could do anything, and I have had 9 years of knowing how that felt, and it turns out I cannot stand near it again. When I see a thing coming apart, I have to put my hands on it. It is not kindness, Your Grace, it is closer to a flinch." "That," Kaelen said at last, "is the first thing anyone has said to me in 9 years that I believed to the end of the sentence." 9 weeks, Maren said. "And then I put my hand on that stone next to yours, and either it warms or it does not. And if it does not, I go back to my shed, and you go on as you have been going on." "Yes," said the king, "you forgot the third one." She stood up too. "It warms, the verse is right, and it takes your heart in payment exactly the way everybody in that hall believes it will. You did not list it, which means you have already decided to go through with it either way." The Alpha King did not turn around. "Good night, Shah," he said, and walked out of the yard. Chapter 4. 3 weeks out from the turn of the year, the Alpha King stood up at the longest night feast and made her impossible. The last supply train had come up 11 days before, and with it Master Hollis Grain, stone factor of the Low Guild at Dunmere. About 60, neat as a folded letter, silver gray hair combed straight back, pale blue eyes. He had supplied every gate in the Reach for 20 years, and he gave out gloves, every winter, to the whole lower yard. When he took Maren's hands in the snow, his grip was startling. His hands were hot, not warm, hot, in a yard where every other hand was a lump of cold meat. "They tell me you have carried your father's work with no ticket for 9 years, Grain had said. "The guild does what I put my seal on. Come down to Dunmere in the spring, and I will have you examined and passed and the wage backdated. 9 years of it. It is owed." The king was on his feet. "You have all heard the verse," Kaelen said. "Most of you have decided what it means. So I will say this plainly, and then nobody in my hall has to whisper. On the last night of the year, I will stand the gate right. Not as a test of a prophecy, as a claim. If the stone warms, Maren Shaw will be my mate and the queen of this Reach, and any man who has a difficulty with that may bring it to me tonight while I am in a good mood." The hall made no sound at all for 2 seconds. Then Torrin Kell banged his cup on the table, once, and after that, it was noise. Maren sat in a borrowed green dress, with her heart going like a hammer drill, and her face, she was fairly sure, doing nothing whatsoever. "You are handing the verse its last clause," Lady Iona Vale said, white to the lips. "Hear me say for the record, as keeper of the verse, that I believe this will kill you." Her voice cracked on the last word, and Maren understood she was not a courtier defending a policy, but a woman who had known him since he was small. And by the door, Hollis Grain watched all of it with an expression of perfect, warm, fatherly concern. Later, Maren found the king alone in the passage behind the dais. "You did not ask me," she said. "No. You stood up in front of 200 people and made me a queen without asking me." "If I had asked you in private and you had said yes, half that hall would have said you were bought," Kaelen said. "If I had asked and you had said no, I would have had to put you outside the gate to protect you from what they made of it. So I did the only thing that cost you nothing. You can refuse me tomorrow, in front of the same 200, and I will not touch a hair of your life for it." "That," Maren said, "is the problem. You gave me a room. You gave me a fire somebody else lights. You said my father's name in a hall where nobody has said it in 9 years. You told 200 people that no one lays a word on me. Do you understand what that is, to a person who has had nothing since she was 17? Her voice was not steady, and she let it not be. "You have made it impossible for me to know what I feel. Every good thing in my life right now has your name on it. So when I stand at that stone and it reads me, what is it going to find? Love? Or the largest debt anybody ever handed a mason?" "I do not know," he said. "That is a terrible answer. It is the only honest one I have. I am a man with a gray arm and 9 years left on the outside. Anything I give you, I give from the top of a mountain to somebody standing at the bottom. There is no way to make it level." "Then find one," Maren said. "I mend things for a living, and I have never once fixed a wall by standing next to it feeling sad." And she lay awake that night thinking one plain and unwelcome thought over and over. If she could not tell the difference between loving him and owing him, the stone would not be able to tell either. Chapter 5. She went down to the gate 2 nights later to repack a hollow flagstone, and she came back up with the whole world turned over. The slab came up sweetly. She packed it in 3 lifts and set it back down dead level, and that should have been the end of it. But the lamp was on the ground beside her, and when she straightened, she saw the Gatestone lit the way she had never seen it lit in her life. Every mason knows the trick. You put the light down low, right against the stone, so it rakes across the surface almost flat, and every cut throws a shadow the length of a finger, and the whole history of the tool comes up out of the rock like breath on a window. Maren held the lamp against the keystone and looked at the verse she had scrubbed 100 times, and her stomach went straight through the new flagstone, because the letters did not match. The verse had been cut with a wide chisel and a flat bevel 200 years ago at least, and every groove was rounded at the lip and packed hard with frost salt and gray lichen. 3 strokes in the last line were not. Narrower, steeper bevel, crisp at the bite where ice should have rounded them. And when Maren laid her thumbnail into one, it came out clean. No lichen in the bottom of that groove at all. She sat down on the frozen ground with the lamp in her lap and said one extremely unqueenly word out loud. Then she stole a sheet of the steward's good paper, wet it, laid it on, and beat a squeeze of that last line until the paper had taken the shape of every cut. She dried it over the guardroom fire and woke Ives Harrow with a lamp on his chest. "I am an old man," Ives said. "You are an old stonebinder," Maren said. "Read this. You are certain of the 3 strokes. I have cut stone since I was 9. I would know a fresh bevel from an old one in the dark by feel. Those 3 have been in that rock less than 20 years. Sit down, Mason. This is worse than you think, and also better. The sleeping stone. Everyone in this reach reads that as the guardians on the arch. It is not. In the old cut, the sleeping stone is a title, the oldest name for the crowned wolf of this line. The first king set a heart in his own chest, and his line was called the sleeping stone ever after, because the stone in them sleeps until it does not. It means him, Maren said. It has always meant him. Then what does the last line say? Ives turned the squeeze around and put his ruined finger on 3 small uprights at the feet of 3 characters. In the old cut, a short upright at the foot of a verb reverses it. It is our word, un. Somebody put one on that verb, and this joining mark on the word payment was cut on top of an older mark, and the older mark was a negative. He looked up. As it stands, the line says, and the stone will take the king's heart in payment. Take out the 3 strokes that do not belong, and the line the first binder cut says this, and the stone will let go the king's heart and take no payment. Say the whole thing, she whispered. When the long cold comes for the wolf that wears the crown, a woman with nothing will give her last warmth at the gate. She will wake the sleeping stone, and the stone will let go the king's heart and take no payment. It is not a warning, Maren said. It never was. It is a promise. The only good news anybody has cut into rock in this reach in 200 years, and for 20 years every soul on this mountain has read it as a death sentence, including him. Maren thought about a man standing alone at that gate in his shirt sleeves, buying months. Then she thought about the rest of it, and her blood went cold in an entirely different way. Ives. Somebody changed it. Somebody stood at the busiest gate in the reach, in daylight, long enough to cut 3 strokes into that keystone, and nobody asked what he was doing, because standing at that gate with tools was the most ordinary thing in the world. Ives Harrow looked at her steadily, with one clear eye and one eye of stone. Chapter 6. She went and told the Alpha King that everything he believed about his own death was a forgery, and he did not believe her, and then he did. He opened the door of his rooms himself, in shirt sleeves, with a book in his hand. She put the squeeze on his table and told him all of it in the order she had found it, and he listened without interrupting once. Say the last line again, he said. And the stone will let go the king's heart and take no payment. Kaelen Roth stood very still. No, he said. You are offering a man with 9 years left the idea that he might have more. If you are wrong, I will not survive being told that twice. Then do not believe me, she said. Believe the lichen. There is 200 years of gray muck packed into every groove on that keystone, and in 3 of them there is none. That is not scholarship, Your Grace. That is dirt. And dirt does not care what anybody wants to be true. She put both hands flat on his table. I am not asking you to trust me. I am asking you to trust a groove. Kaelen Roth crossed the room and pulled the bell rope so hard it came away in his hand. Lady Iona sat with the squeeze under 2 candles for 11 minutes without a word, and then put a hand over her mouth, and that was answer enough. Daylight and instruments in the morning, the king told her. Go to bed. Then it was only the fire and the 2 of them. 9 years ago, I woke up with 2 gray fingers, Kaelen said. I was 23. My father died at 41 and his father at 38, and I watched both of them wear gloves at their own tables and refused to explain. Then it happened to me, and I put on a glove that morning and never took it off again. He looked into the fire. I never took a mate. I told the court it was policy. It was that I could not hand a woman a husband who was turning into a wall. I have had a great deal of time to consider that it might only have been a way of never being seen. Take off the glove, she said. It is not pleasant to look at, Kaelen said. I have my father's hands, a scar across this palm from a slipped chisel, 2 fingers that do not straighten anymore, Knuckles split every winter since I was 11. Nobody has held them in 9 years either. She held them out, both open. Take off the glove, Kaelen. It was the first time she had used his name. He pulled the glove off with his teeth, which was the least kingly and most human thing she had ever seen anybody do, and put his left hand into both of hers. It was heavy. That was the thing nobody would have guessed. It weighed what a hand of stone weighs, and it was smooth and cold the way the inside of a church is cold, with a faint grain under her fingertips, like the flow lines in granite. She held it. She did not stroke it, and she did not look at it with pity. She held it the way she would hold a piece of work handed to her by another craftsman, turning it, thumb on the back, taking its weight. "Well," Maren said, and her voice came out wrong. "It is a very good hand." Kaelen Roth made a sound that was not a laugh, and was not anything else either. And he brought his living hand up and put it against her jaw, and it was warm, and it was shaking. She rose up on her toes and kissed him. It was a slow, careful, thorough thing, and neither of them was in any hurry at all. She had a fistful of his shirt at some point. He had his hand at the back of her neck under the braid. And when they stopped with their foreheads together, breathing like people who had run up the north stair. 2 days, Kaelen said against her mouth. By the middle of the next morning, she had the rest of it, and it was worse than she had let herself imagine. Iona spent 4 hours at the gate and came in with a verdict. 3 strokes, modern chisel, narrow and steep ground, lowland pattern, and no tool of that width anywhere in the fortress. So I've sent her down to the keep stores, because whoever cut it had held tools at that gate in daylight, and nobody had thought to ask why. The small barrels at the back of the 8th Dunmere sledge carried Hollis Grain's own mark. Maren prized a lid off, found grit that looked exactly like bond sand, ran her fingers through it, and it was cold. Bond sand is never cold. Her father had put her hand in a bucket of it when she was 11 so that she would know. Live bond sand sits at the temperature of a person, in any weather, and this was the temperature of the yard. Ives had her set 2 dishes on the infirmary sill with water on both, one of Grain's and one from his own pouch. An hour later, his was still water. Over Grain's, there was a solid gray disk of ice. "Dead grit sold at bond price for 20 years, to every gate in the reach," said Ives. "Now sit down, because here is the part that will cost you. Guardians do not fall. Sorrow came down 9 years ago because somebody sawed the heart out of her chest while she stood on that arch. And this gate lost 1/3 of its bond in one night. And the masons were told to rebuild the north stair in a hurry before the freeze, with barrels off a sledge that had just come up the pass." "My father did not fall," she said. "He was standing under a wall that had been sold a lie. And whoever took that heart, what does he do with it? He burns it. A stolen heart holds the long cold off a man for years and keeps his hands hot as a bread oven. And when it runs out, he needs another." His good eye came round to her. "Think, Mason, who in this reach has hands like that?" Maren stood up. "Hollis Grain is 60 years old," she said, "and he has the long cold. And he has been buying himself time out of the chests of the things I have spent 9 years mending." Up in the keep, the horn went. 3 short notes, which meant every soul in Stonewatch was called to the high hall at once. "That is not the king's order," Oren Shale said slowly. "Master Grain has been in the hall since dawn." Chapter 7. She walked into the high hall with the proof of everything in her pocket, and discovered that he had gotten there first. Hollis Grain stood at the foot of the dais in a good coat, with a brass seal case open on the table beside him, and both hands folded in front of him, like a man at a funeral he is sorry about. "Miss Shaw," he said kindly, and that was the moment Maren understood how much trouble she was in. "Your Grace," Grain said to the king. I would give a great deal not to be standing here. 2 nights ago, past the 10th hour, a guard on the west wall watched a person work at the Gatestone with a bar and a chisel for the better part of an hour. His name is Padraig Vance, and he has 11 years on that wall. A young man near the door went the color of ash and nodded. That same night, a sheet of prepared paper went out of the steward's press. Yesterday morning, Miss Shaw brought you a wet squeeze of the last line of the verse, and a claim that 3 of its strokes are new. They are new, Hollis Green said. She cut them the night before she showed them to you. That is a lie, Maren said. I wish it were. I am not going to stand here and call you wicked, Miss Shaw. You were told in this hall that a verse in a rock says you will kill a man you have since become fond of. You are a mason. You had the tools and one night. He spread his warm hands. You made the rock say something kinder. Because every fact of it was true, she thought. She had gone down there at night. She had taken the bar and the bucket and the lamp. She had stolen the paper. There was not one thing she could deny, and the only thing that mattered, the order of events, was invisible. Lady Iona has examined the cut, Kaelen said. Lady Iona has spent 40 years teaching that verse, and has just been told she got it wrong, Grain said gently. Her gauges have been in Miss Shaw's hands. She wants very badly for you not to die, and a person who wants a thing that badly is the worst possible judge of a groove. And Maren watched the hall move. Not to cruelty. That was the thing she would remember. Not one face in that room was enjoying it. They were relieved. 5 weeks frightened for their king, and here was a kind old man with a reasonable explanation, and their relief did what malice never could have. There is a charge, Grain said, and lifted a folded writ off the table. The Low Guild holds the charter of every bonded stone in the Reach, sealed by your great-grandfather, and defacing one is a guild matter. Maren Shaw is to come to Dunmere and answer it, and if you tear that up, you break the charter. And the charter is the only reason there is lime and iron at 11 gates on this mountain. And I do not want her. I want this over. He unwrapped a bundle from the seal case. What I came for is this. Inside was a stone the size of a heart, dull and banded gray, and even at 30 paces Maren could see the heat coming off it, because the frost on the table beneath it had gone to water in a ring. Recovered from the ruin of sorrow 9 years ago, and held in trust by the guild, Grain said. I know what you have under that glove. Your father did too. I offered him this, and he was too proud, and he died at 41. Set it in the wall of your chamber, put your hand on it every night, and the long cold does not reach your heart for 20 years. No king of your line has seen 52. Torrin Kell said very quietly, What is the price? The Gatestone comes down and is vested in the guild, where it can be kept properly, said Hollis Grain, and the Coldmouth Pass is open to a guild road, tolled and maintained year-round. No more deep winter order, no more men freezing at gates. He let that sit exactly long enough. I would rather lose my reputation than watch another one of you die at 40. Maren looked around that hall and saw people crying. She had 2 dishes on a windowsill, a saw kerf in a broken chest, and a jar of grit, and a room full of people who had just been offered 20 more years of their king by the most generous man on the mountain. She looked up at the dais. Kaelen Roth was looking straight at her, and his face gave away absolutely nothing, and he did not say one single word. Chapter 8. He did not speak to her at all, and then he spoke 7 words, and they were the worst she had ever heard. The rite is cancelled, Kaelen Roth said. Maren Shaw leaves this keep tonight. She heard Bettany Fell, near the kitchen door, say her name once, and then, because she was Corinshaw's daughter, and because you do not go down without driving one last wedge into the crack, she put her voice across that hall like a bar under a slab. There are 2 dishes on the infirmary windowsill, Maren said. One holds bond sand out of Master Grain's own barrel, sealed with his mark. The other holds live bond sand from a stonebinder's pouch. Same water, same cold, same hour. One is ice, one is not. Any of you can go and look. That is not a groove, and it is not a woman's word. That is a dish. For one moment, the hall wavered. And the other has been in her possession all night, said Hollis Grain sadly, and the moment closed like a door. In the mason's shed, she rolled her tools into their leather, because she had never once in her life put a tool away badly. The jar of grit went into her coat. Bettany Fell came in with the green dress folded over her arm and her face streaming. "You are not taking this," Maren said. "It is his. He had it made for you." "Then it is a gift from a man who has just sent me out in the snow, and I would rather be cold," Maren said. Her voice cracked straight across the middle of it, and Bettany put both red hands over her mouth. Orange Shale was at the little side door with a lantern and a bag of bread. "The order stands, no stranger through this gate. It also does not say a word about going out," he said. "There is a woodcutter's hut a mile down at the second bend. I fixed the stove myself, and I did a poor job, and you will have opinions about it." He pressed the bag into her hands. "In 9 years, I have never found a fault in your work, Miss Shaw, and I have looked." She went out into the storm with her father's cloak on her shoulders and her tools on her back, and the little door shut behind her, and the sound it made was final. She got 90 paces down the road and stopped, because that was as far as she could make herself go. She stood at the milestone where all of this had started and found that she was not crying. She was coldly and thoroughly angry. And under the anger, there was a plan trying to form. Then a lantern came out of the gate behind her. Chapter 9. He came down the road on foot, alone, with no crown, no guard, and no gloves, which was the only apology she was ever going to get in advance. "Say it fast," Maren said. "I am extremely cold, and I am not in a forgiving frame of mind." "There are 4 guildmen in my hall, with a writ under my great-grandfather's seal," Kaelen said. "It is lawful, and it can be served on any bonded stone in the reach, and this whole fortress is bonded stone. If you had still been inside those walls at midnight, they would have taken you down the pass tonight, in the dark, to a guild court in a town he owns. The only ground on this mountain where that writ cannot be served is outside this gate, because of my own deep winter order." He said it flatly, the way a man reads a ledger. "I could not stop them taking you. I could put you somewhere they were not allowed to go." Maren stood with the wind pulling at her hood. "You could have told me." "His clerk was standing at my elbow with a pen. If I had leaned over and told you, they would have had you on the stair in 10 minutes and called it flight." "Then you could have told me afterward, in the shed. You had an hour." "Yes," said the king. "So why did you not?" Kaelen Roth was quiet a moment, and the honest answer, when it came, was worse than an excuse. "Because I have spent 9 years managing people so they would not see the thing I did not want them to see," he said. "And I did it to you without even stopping to decide." Maren let out a breath the wind took away. "Do you know what that was, standing in that hall?" she said. "It was not the accusation. I can fight an accusation. It was a man on a dais deciding what happens to my life while I stood 8 feet away in a room where nobody asked me anything. That has happened to me every year since I was 17. It happened when they gave me my father's tools and not his wage. It happened when the guild would not examine me. And I let all of it go, Your Grace, because none of those men had ever put his hand in mine and let me hold it." The Alpha King of the Reach went down on one knee in the snow. He did it plainly, without ceremony, in a coat with no crown on him, and his bare gray hand hanging at his side, in the road outside his own gate. And Maren, who had spent her life around men who would sooner die than be seen kneeling, understood exactly what it cost him. "I am not asking you to come back," Kaelen said. "I am asking you to let me be wrong out loud in front of the same people I was wrong in front of. And then I will do whatever you say next, including nothing." "Get up," Maren said. "You will freeze, and I have no cloak to spare, as you may recall." He got up. "I cannot clear you," he said. "Anything I do for you now looks like a man protecting the woman he wants, and Grain has arranged it so that every kindness I show you is evidence against you." "I know," Maren said. "That is why you are not going to do it. I am." She counted them off on her fingers and found that the anger had turned into something with edges and a use. "At dawn, at the gate, in front of every soul in this fortress, with 3 things anybody in that yard can see without believing one word I say. The dishes, the saw kerf in Sorrow's chest, and the width of the chisel that cut those 3 strokes, which nobody at Stonewatch owns, and which I will bet my father's mallet is sitting in a sledge in your own yard tonight." Kaelen Roth stared at her. "And there is a 4th thing," Maren said, "and it is the only one that frightens me. When it is over, if it goes the way I want it to go, I am still a woman who owns nothing except what you have given her. So before I put one finger on that stone, you are going to take all of it back. The room, the dress, the writ of protection, my name on your steward's roll, all of it, in front of them. Maren, if I strip you of my protection in that yard, you are a lower yard mason with a guild writ on her head." "Yes," she said. "And when I lay my hand on that keystone beside yours, nobody in the Reach will ever be able to say I did it because I was owed something. Not the court, not Grain." Her voice went quiet under the wind. "Not me." "Dawn," said the Alpha King. "Dawn," said Maren. "And send Orange Shale down here with a lantern, because I intend to sleep in a hut he built badly and complain about it in the morning." Chapter 10. At first light, the whole of Stonewatch came down into the lower yard, and a mason with a guild writ on her head walked back in through the little side door carrying her own tools. The court stood on the gatehouse steps, the garrison lined the wall. Hollis Grain waited by the mounting block with 4 guild men and the seal case under his arm. The Alpha King came out under the arch and did the first thing. "Before anything else is said in this yard," Kaelen Roth called out, "I am taking back every gift I ever made to Maren Shaw. Her room in this keep is closed. The dress is burned. Her name comes off my steward's roll. My protection over her is withdrawn in front of all of you, and any man who wants to test that may find out afterward what I do about it. She asked me for this. I want it understood that I did not want to do it." Nobody moved. "And the second thing," said the king. He pulled off his left glove and held up his hand. 200 people saw it at once, in daylight, gray from the fingertips to the elbow, with the tide mark ragged on the forearm. The sound the yard made was not disgust, it was grief. "The long cold," Kaelen said. 9 years. It took my father at 41 and his father at 38, and I have stood in front of every one of you with a glove on and let you think it was a habit. Lady Iona has been telling me for 9 years that this keystone says a woman would take my heart in payment for it. She believed that. So did I. So did all of you." He put the bare hand down at his side and left it there. "Master Shaw says the verse says the opposite, and that somebody cut it out of true. She has an hour and my whole yard. Listen to her the way you would listen to a man." Maren set her tool roll down on the flagstone she had repacked herself. "I am going to show you 3 things," she said. "You do not have to believe me for any of them. That is the point. Master Grain, I would take it kindly if you stood where everybody can see you." "Of course," said Hollis Grain pleasantly, and did. The first is a dish. Orange Shale brought both of them down from the infirmary sill, having sat with them all night on Iona Vale's instruction. One held clear water over dark, wet grit. The other held a solid disk of gray ice. Live bond sand sits at the warmth of a person, and water will not freeze on it, Maren said. That is not craft, it is a fact. This one came out of Master Grain's own barrels, sealed with his own mark. She lifted the disk of ice out with her thumbnail and held it so the light came through it. It is dead. It is grit. It has been sold at bond price to 11 gates on this mountain for 20 years. It is why every guardian in the Reach has been failing. And it is why the North Stair came down 9 years ago on my father. The yard made a low sound. That proves a barrel is bad, not a man, said Grain. I buy from 40 quarries. Yes. So here's the second thing. Maren pulled the tarpaulin off Sorrow in front of all of them, and the yard saw what had been lying under a sheet in its own courtyard for 9 years. 11 pieces. A woman's face, calm, eyes closed, on its side in the snow. Bettany Fell made a sound and turned away. Maren knelt at the broken torso, put 2 fingers into the empty socket in its chest, and held the lamp flat and low so the light raked across the cut. That socket was hollowed with a point 200 years ago. The channel across the front of it is a saw kerf, frame saw, coarse pitch. It cuts through the old face, which means it happened later. Guardians do not fall, and this one did not fall. Somebody sawed her heart out while she stood on that arch, and then she came down. She looked up. Captain Shale, the lead sledge. Orange Shale came back through the crowd with a frame saw in both hands. Maren laid the blade into the kerf, and it sat down into it like a key into a ward. Coarse pitch, lowland pattern, and the third tooth from the heel is broken off short, she said, and put her thumb on a small square ridge standing in the bottom of the channel. Which is why there is a witness mark right here that no other saw on this mountain could leave. The yard had gone very quiet. The third thing is the verse, and Lady Iona will read it out, because she is the keeper of it, and I am a woman with a writ on her head. Iona Vale stepped to the keystone with her brass gauges and her voice pitched to carry. 3 strokes in the last line, cut with a chisel 11/16 across, ground steep, lowland pattern. There is no chisel of that width in the mason's shed of this fortress, and Master Shaw's tools have been sealed in Captain Shale's keeping since last night. She lowered the gauge. And one thing more, a lowland chisel is faced with soft iron, and when it cuts fresh stone, it leaves a bloom of iron in the groove, and that bloom rusts. There is rust in the bottom of those 3 strokes. There is none in any of the other 400. Maren turned around. Master Grain, would you open your tool roll? For the first time since he had come up the pass, Hollis Grain's face did something that was not warm. He did not open it. Orange Shale opened it and held up a narrow chisel with a steep ground bevel, and Iona Vale put a gauge across it and read out a number, and the number was 11/16. Nobody in that yard said anything at all, and Hollis Grain looked around at 200 faces and gave up the pretense in a way that was somehow far worse than shouting. I was 40 when my hand went gray, he said. Nobody put me on a dais about it. Nobody wrote me a verse. He unwrapped the heartstone, and the frost went off the wood in a spreading ring. I have fed 11 gates for 20 years and kept this pass open, and everything I took out of rubble that was already lying in a yard under a sheet. I would do it again tomorrow, because I am not finished. He closed his hot hand around the heart of Sorrow and lifted it. Vigil, said Hollis Grain. The guardian at the milestone came up off the road. It came through the arch in 4 strides, stone shoulders scraping the pier, snow sheeting off its back, and the crowd broke sideways and screamed, and it came straight for the woman standing under the keystone. Maren did not run. She had, she thought afterward, a very clear head about it, and one single reason, which was that she had known that thing since she was 9 years old. "Vigil," she said. "Stop." It did not stop. "I led the crack at the root of your left wing when I was 17, Maren said, and her voice came out steady and quite loud. "It opened again 4 years later, and I filled it again and put a lead flashing over the top so the water would stop getting in. Nobody paid me. Nobody asked me. I did it because it was cracked." 10 feet. "Patience," she said, without looking away. "I have washed the frost salt off your face every spring since I was 11, and I have never once been able to do anything about your nose, and I am sorry about it." 6 feet. "Sorrow," Maren said, and her voice finally went. "I never lifted your cloth. 9 years. I walked past you every day, and I could not make myself look at you in pieces. That was cowardice, and it is the only work in this yard I ever left undone, and I am sorry. I am so sorry." Vigil stopped. It stopped with its hand out and 1 foot forward, close enough that Maren could see the lead flashing she had set on its shoulder, dulled and gray and still perfectly in place. And the great head turned, slowly, all the way round, until it was looking back down the yard at Hollis Grain. "A heart is the anchor," Ives Harrow called out from the back of the crowd, with a savage old joy in it. "But the keeping is the fuel, and you never kept anything in your life." Vigil went back down the yard. Grain did not run either. Maren gave him that. He stood with the heart in his hand and his arm out and gave the order twice more, and the guardian took the stone out of his palm the way you take a knife off a child. Hollis Grain folded onto the cobbles. By the time Orange Shale's men reached him, the gray had come up out of his sleeve and over his collarbone, 20 years of it arriving at once, and he lay there with his eyes open and his teeth chattering and his hands, at last, as cold as anybody's. "Take him to the guardroom and put a fire on him," Maren said. "He does not get to die in my yard before he answers for my father." Then she turned round and looked at the Alpha King. "Well," she said, "that is the third thing." The yard did not cheer. It was too early and too cold, and everyone in it had just watched a statue walk twice. What it did was open up and leave a straight line between a mason and a king. Kaelen Roth came and stood at the Gatestone. "You own nothing of mine," he said. "You have no protection from me, no room in my keep, no place on my roll, and a guild writ on your head that I have not lifted." "That is correct." "Then there is nothing to owe," Kaelen said. "Master Shah, will you put your hand on this stone?" And Maren stood in front of the keystone she had scrubbed 100 times and asked herself, honestly, for the last time, the question that had kept her awake for 5 weeks. Was it the room? Was it the fire somebody else lit, or her father's name said out loud in a hall, or a hand of stone laid trusting into hers? The answer came up plain and unromantic and entirely her own, which was how she knew it was true. She thought, "I want to be in the room when he laughs." That is the whole of it. I would want that if he were a mason. I would want it if he had nothing at all. "Yes," she said. She put her right hand flat on the gatestone. Kaelen Roth put his bare, gray hand beside it. For 3 long breaths, nothing happened, and Iona Vale stopped breathing entirely. Then the frost went off the keystone. It did not crack or flash or sing. It simply went from white to wet, all across its face at once, and the melt ran down out of the letters in 400 small, dark rivers, and steam came off the stone into the freezing air in a slow, soft cloud that rose past the arch and out over the yard. And in the last line of the verse, 3 grooves ran rust red. They wept it out plain, 3 orange threads down the wet gray face of the keystone in front of 200 people, while every other groove in that rock ran clean. The stone had published the forgery itself. Maren heard Iona Vale say the true line out loud in a voice that broke on the second word. And the stone will let go the king's heart and take no payment. Under her palm, the keystone was warm as a loaf. Beside her hand, Kaelen Roth's fingers moved. He looked down at his own arm, and Maren looked, and along the ragged tide mark below his elbow, the gray had gone back the width of a thumb. Chapter 11. The stone let go slowly, and that turned out to be the mercy in it, because it gave them all winter to get used to being alive. There was no miracle in that yard. A thumb's width of gray went back and no more, and Maren, who had spent her life watching mortar cure, was the only person present who was not disappointed. "It is a joint," she told him in the guardroom, with both his hands wrapped round a cup he could not properly feel. "You do not pack a joint and then stand there waiting for it to be a wall. It goes off in its own time, and from the outside in. Come down to that stone every night the way you always have. Only now you are not buying months. Now you are letting go of something." It took the winter. By the thaw, the gray had gone back past his wrist. By midsummer, it had left the hand entirely, except for the middle knuckle of the second finger, and there it stopped, and there it stayed for the rest of his life, and he never had it looked at again. Ives Harrow went back on the roll. The Low Guild fought it for 11 days, then discovered that its charter over every bonded stone in the Reach had been voided by its own factor's fraud, and stopped fighting rather abruptly. And on a bright, hard morning in the second week of the year, Maren Shaw went up a ladder at the Coldmouth Gate with a mallet and a narrow chisel and cut 3 strokes out of the keystone, while Iona Vale stood below her in the cold and read the true line aloud, over and over until it was done. "You could leave them," Iona said, "as a record." "The record is in your book, my lady," Maren said through the mallet. "This is a gate. A gate should say what it means." He came down to the mason's shed on a Thursday, alone, no guard, no crown, no announcement. He had to duck under the lintel, and he stood in a shed that smelled of lime and old iron, with his hands hanging at his sides, like a man who had walked into the wrong room. "I have been standing outside for a quarter of an hour," Kaelen Roth said. "I know," said Maren. "Your shadow was across my bench." "Maren." He stopped, started again, made a poor job of it, and she let him. "I stood up in a hall in front of 200 people and told them what you were going to be. And I did it without asking you. And I told myself it was strategy. It was not. It was a man arranging a room so he would not have to hear no. I have nothing to offer you that you have not already made me take back. So I am asking, in a shed, badly, will you marry me?" Maren put down her mallet. "Ask me the other one first," she said. "Which other one?" "The one you never asked in that hall. Not, will you be my queen? The small one." Kaelen Roth looked at her and understood. And for the first time in 9 years, the Alpha King of the Reach went red to the ears. "Will you have me?" he said. "Yes," said Maren Shaw. "I will have you. I would have had you in that yard the night you laughed at a flagstone, and I have been furious about it ever since." He crossed the shed in 2 steps, and she came up off the bench to meet him, and she got lime dust all over the front of his good coat, and neither of them cared about that or about anything else for quite some time. Afterward, with her head under his chin and the stove ticking, she said, "One condition. The iron door at the top of the north stair comes off its hinges. This week. I will take it off myself. There is a lower yard and an upper keep in this fortress, and there has never been a reason for it except that somebody once hung a door." "Done," said the king, "and I keep the shed." "Maren," said Kaelen Roth, "I would not dare." Epilogue. Here is what became of all of it, because a story that stops at the kiss is only half told, and every soul in that yard had a life afterward. Hollis Grain was tried at the Coldmouth Gate in the spring, under the king's law and not the guild's, in the open, with the whole lower yard standing where they had stood on the morning of the rite. He did not deny any of it. He was found guilty of the theft of 7 guardian hearts, of the fraudulent supply of dead bond sand to 11 fortresses over 22 years, of the defacing of the Gatestone, and of the deaths of Corin Shaw, Pell Arden, and Thomas Veck in the fall of the North Stair. The guild seal was broken on the anvil in front of him. Then, through the whole of that summer, under guard, Hollis Grain carried every stolen heart he had left back up into the mountains himself, on foot, to the 7 gates he had taken them from, and set each one back into the chest it came out of with his own hands, while a binder watched him do it. It took 4 months, and it very nearly killed him. He lived 4 more winters after that, in a warm room in Dunmere, with a fire and a window and a physician, and no stolen years at all. And he died in his bed at 64, which was, as Maren observed once and never again, 23 years more than he gave her father. The hearts went home. 6 of the 7 guardians woke within 3 years. The 7th was Sorrow. Maren rebuilt her over 3 summers, in the yard, in the open, with the pieces laid out on trestles and half the garrison stopping to hold something. She cut a new left hand because the old one had gone to gravel. She pinned the wings in bronze. She set the heart back into its socket on a midsummer evening, with Ives Harrow sitting on a bucket beside her, telling her she was doing it wrong. Sorrow stood up on the 5th winter, in the middle of the night, walked once around the yard, and climbed onto the eastern end of the arch, and has not come down since. Maren was there. She had been sleeping in the shed on purpose for a month. The wedding was in spring, at the gate, because Maren refused point blank to be married in a hall. They put their hands on the warm keystone together in front of the whole reach, and Bettany Fell cooked for 600 people and cried through all of it. And Torin Kell gave a speech that was too long and contained one joke about flagstones that got the biggest laugh of the day. They live at Stonewatch, year-round. The court still comes up for the winters and still complains about the altitude. The iron door at the top of the north stair came off its hinges that same week, as promised, and was made into a fire back for the kitchen, and the stair has been open ever since. The deep winter order still stands at the Coldmouth Gate. No stranger comes through until the thaw. But there is a clause under it now, in Oren Shale's square handwriting, and every gate in the Reach copied it within 5 years, and it is called the Shaw Clause. It says that on every night of the deep winter, a hot pot and a blanket go out to the milestone, and a man goes with them, and that no captain is ever again to stand at a slot in a door and do arithmetic about a stranger. Oren Shale was made warden of Coldmouth. Torin Kell remained beta and remained insufferable. Iona Vale rewrote her book, recanted the old reading in the first 6 pages of it, and went to her grave at 81 with the true verse cut over her door. Ives Harrow was restored as stonebinder of the Reach and given a room over the forge with a stove that Maren rebuilt for him twice. He lived 11 more years and taught 19 binders, and is buried in the lower yard, at his own request, at the foot of the arch, where the guardians can keep an eye on him. There is a Masons' Guild in the Reach now, chartered at Stonewatch, and Maren Shaw was its first master, and she never did go down to Dunmere to sit anybody's examination. Her father's name is cut into the face of the North Stair beside Pell Arden and Thomas Veck, with the date and the truth about why the wall came down. The road was built, after all, 3 years later, by the reach and not by anybody's factor. It is told, the tolls keep 11 gates in good lime, and Dunmere is twice the town it was. Their daughter was born on the third winter, and they called her Ivy, which was as close as Maren could get to a name the old man would tolerate. She has her mother's chestnut hair and her father's pale amber eyes, and on the ball of her right thumb, a small, smooth patch of gray. Maren found it when the baby was 4 days old and did not sleep that night. Ives Harrow came up in the morning, put his ruined hand over it, and laughed until he had to sit down. "That is not the cold," he said. "The cold starts in a whole hand, and it starts in a grown man. This is a binder's mark, Mason." Her grandfather 10 times over set a heart in his own chest, and this reach has spent 200 years calling that a curse. It is a trade. She will have hands that a guardian answers, and if you have not put a trowel in one of them by the time she is 9, you will have wasted her. Ivy Roth was given a trowel at 6. There is a son as well, Corin, 2 years younger, who has no mark at all and no interest whatsoever in stone, and who wants to keep bees. His mother has told him that this is entirely allowed, and on the last night of every year, the Alpha King of the Reach and the Master Mason of Stonewatch walk down together to the Coldmouth Gate, after everyone else has gone in, and put their hands on the keystone, and stand there a while in the cold with the guardians overhead. Not to buy anything, not anymore. They just like the way it stays warm. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed this story. When Kaelen sent Maren out into the snow that night without one word of explanation, was he protecting her, or was he a coward? And would you have taken him back at the milestone, or made him wait out the whole winter for it? Pick a side. You cannot say both. Let me know in the comments. I read every one. If you'd like more stories, there are plenty more on the channel. Much love, Sophie.